This episode is sponsored by Unleash America. If you're serious about the future of work, this is the event to be at. Unleash America takes over Las Vegas March 17th to the 19th with HR's top leaders, innovators, and tech disruptors for 3 days of big ideas, big conversations, and real solutions.
You don't want to miss it, and we'll be there, so come say hi.
Unleash America, where we're reinventing HR together.
Head to unleash.ai/unleashamerica and grab your tickets now.
Welcome to Don't Tell Me About Yourself, the podcast where old school hiring meets a modern reality check.
I'm Lorna Erickson.
And I'm Victoria Gates, and we're the co-founders of Expert Interviewers.
Between the two of us, we've got 40 years of hiring experience. We've studied interviewing techniques. We've trained thousands of people globally to stop making the same mistakes over and over again.
And we've got 340,000 people following us online because apparently everyone has a story about a bad interview. You know the ones. The illegal questions, the 45-minute monologues, showing up late with no apology.
So every week, we're tackling the biggest subjects in hiring.
We bring real stories, real data, and real talk about how to make interviews actually work for everyone.
Because great hiring isn't luck, it's a practice skill. So whether you hire, apply, or just love a good interview train wreck, the show is for you.
And today, we're talking about personality assessments in hiring. Nearly 80% of Fortune 500 companies use them, and they're positioned as predictive, objective, data-driven. But here's the question are they improving hiring decisions or replacing interviewer judgment?
Because when a personality report becomes the deciding vote, you're no longer evaluating performance. You're evaluating a profile, and those are not the same thing. So today we're unpacking what these tools actually measure, what the research says about their predictive power, and why so many hiring teams misuse them. Should a personality test decide your next hire?
Let's get into it.
Now, before we share our take on this, let's define what these predictive personality tests actually are. A predictive personality test is a standardized assessment designed to measure behavioral tendencies, personality traits, sometimes even things like IQ. And they say that they correlate with the job performance or what the job is going to need.
So when we talk about it, what are they actually looking at? What do they think they're measuring, I guess is what I want to know.
Yeah. So sometimes it's like emotional stability, agreeableness, openness, dominance. For sales positions, they're looking for that extrovert.
Yeah, social skills, drive, things like that. Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes it is just straight up what they define as, well, maybe they didn't take the time to actually define it, but what they think is intelligence. There's legit IQ tests or having engineers take basic knowledge tests on things. Mm-hmm. They could be measuring a number of different things.
Right. And most of the time when I've seen them, they've been self-report questionnaires where it's you're answering a statement. You're saying, I prefer to take charge in group settings. Mm-hmm. I get stressed easily, or I follow the rules. And then those responses are what they're scoring and kind of looking at across groups, right? Is that?
Yeah, against groups and norms. So they'll often try to categorize people into different percentiles. You're at the 98th percentile of being assertive, or the trait profiles, cultural alignment indicators, which is so vague.
Yeah,
but
that sounds icky. I don't like that one.
Yeah.
But probably red flags too. I imagine what they're attempting to do is they've given a personality test to someone who they consider a top performer, and they're just trying to clone that person, right?
Right.
Is essentially what I take it as, is
yes.
They're essentially benchmarking it against that, and they think that that's the recipe for success, right?
Right. And I'd like to think that it is a top performer in the company, because I could probably back that a little bit more. But I feel what it is, and I hope maybe there's some assessment companies out there that are going to listen to this. I kind of feel it's the assessment companies that are deciding, hey, this person means that they're an extrovert if they answer these ways, or they means that they're assertive if they answer these ways. It's is it actually how the company defines it, or is it how these assessments just define it?
Yeah, that's valid. And we talked about it earlier that 80% of Fortune 500 companies use personality assessments. And what I was thinking about when we decided to have this topic and discuss this was well, how big really is this industry? How often is this showing up? I was just curious. And when I looked into it, I saw that the North America personality assessment industry was a $4 billion with a B dollar industry in 2025.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was surprising.
They're being used. Yeah. They're making money.
Yeah. And 100 million people globally take these tests every year, which I also found very interesting. And I
Wow.
was thinking about that, like money wise. I'm like, okay, 100 million. And it's about like $200 on average per assessment. It just depends on like what level, are we doing executive testing? How deep are we going? Right. Things like that. If you're putting this in the front of your hiring process, if this is like a hiring a sort of gatekeeper, right? A gate you're trying to pass
Yeah.
with candidates. Like, it feels like it's going to be a lot of wasted money, no?
I mean, it is, especially if it's like an early screening process. I don't doubt that it's going to screen out a lot of people,
Yeah.
but is it screening out the right people? Is
Right.
kind of my question here. So how costly is it? We're talking about how much the assessments cost, but are these companies taking into consideration how many great candidates could be excluded based on this random personality
Right.
test? You can't factor in that cost because we don't know what that would be, what that
Yeah.
person could have brought to your company. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different costs that go into them, but straight up money, that's a lot of money.
It is. And the
Yeah.
bigger issue, though, for me isn't even like the cost when I think about it. It's like
Yeah.
they think they're solving a problem that I don't think they're solving.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what your thought is or what some of your take is on these problems that they think they're solving.
I think the problems that they think that they're solving is they want somebody who is like a doctor or a psychologist in there to help decode what candidates are saying and like really thinking. It's like, what's really going on in that brain of yours?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a shortcut for them to say, just take this assessment and we'll get this kind of security blanket type of thing of knowing who you are and how you really work inside.
Yeah.
That's what I think they're getting. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think like assessments inherently like aren't bad. It's just when they're used to replace interviewing skill, when you're saying we're trying to get into the psyche of this person and this is adjusting our decision making because we're going to use this assessment. That's where I think you run into trouble when you're using it to do that instead of training people to ask the behavioral questions, to identify patterns with the candidate, to compare the evidence that you've heard to top performers and do that. I think you're leveraging or relying on a tool more than you are on the skill of what you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I hear you when you say that like assessments aren't inherently bad. And I totally agree with that. And so does my 14-year-old self from the 17 magazine quizzes that were always in there. I'm like sitting in, library in 8th grade, like filling out these quizzes. Are you a good friend? I'm like, I don't know. I got to take this 15 question assessment to find out if I am. So like, I love assessments and so many of them can be accurate, but not to hire people. We'll get into it a little bit too about the psyche of candidates as they're going through this, like how they game it. I mean, how I gamed it. I'll just speak personally. I remember taking these assessments, and I specifically remember thinking, what's my answer and what do I think the company's answer wants me to be?
Right. Well, and one thing you're hitting on is that we've enjoyed them in the past. Like my kids still do it. So like they get a National Geographic magazine that we keep in the car. I think honestly, you might have given me that tip for my kids. I feel like you did, is that you said you keep magazines in the car. It's a genius trick for all the parents out there. Anyway, they have tests, right? So they'll quiz each other. The difference though here is with personality assessments, you're taking a test and then you don't get to know the results. Where my kids are sitting in the backseat of my car and my daughter's reading to my son what his results are, right? They have a back and forth. So when you're buying a tool that's a one-way tool, it's easier. You think you're doing this like predictive hiring, but really it's a convenience. It's a replacement for training and it's not a two-way street because it's not a quiz in 17 magazine or in the backseat of my car via National Geographic. It's different.
Because imagine like your son or me, my 14-year-old self, not being able to see the results after I just invested all that time. I'm like, well, what is it? What am I? Like, tell me what I am. And then to take it a step further as a person actually looking for a job as a candidate, for them to invest all that time and then just be like, sorry, you're not a fit.
Yeah. We talk a lot about trust in the hiring process and how it's sort of eroding with certain things, how you can build it. We'll talk about that in some episodes too. But in this case, this is how you break trust, right? Because the candidate's sitting there going, there's no transparency. There's no feedback. I'm getting generically labeled. It's like saying the algorithm rejected your resume. It's the same thing. It's just instead of the algorithm, it's the personality test rejected you.
Right. Yeah. You're reduced to a dashboard. It's like, this is who you are. When we were researching this topic, it's like candidates feel like it's astrology for business. And I'm like, it kind of is. It's like, what are you? It's like,
I'm pretty sure we've done a skit like that where someone didn't want to hire someone because of their star sign. I feel like we did.
That's right. We did
So
do one
funny,
of those.
but you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's also replaces accountability in some ways, right? Like, well, it's the test. The test said you're not a fit. Like, sorry, you don't have to be accountable to that decision.
Right. Right. And hiring managers, I mean, that's why a lot of hiring managers bring in a lot more people into the interviewing process that need to be there, because it's stressful to be the person that has to make a decision on who to hire and not to hire. So if you can grab 4 other people who have skin in the game or an assessment that you can blame a bad hire on, then that's going to help. You can take credit for all the good hires, but then blame the bad hires on the people that didn't have the right assessment or somebody else that interviewed them.
And it feels like as a candidate, you're making decisions about my career based off of a chart, based off of a dashboard. And the data that you've gathered is probably valuable. And we can talk about where these things can be used later. But your interpretation and how you're using it is where the issue is, right? Like that's where the astrology for business type of thing comes in. Because it would be like saying, I'm not friends with Tauruses.
Yeah.
I'm just not. So then you and I wouldn't be friends if I'm not friends with Tauruses. And that's such a shallow interpretation of who a Taurus is. It just feels like very reductive.
Right.
Untrained.
Yeah. And when I think about some of our training that we do for our clients, so many of them, I can hear them saying, like, I just want to know how the candidate thinks. I just want to know their thought processes. And so often in our training, we have to remind people that you don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a psychologist. You don't have to be an industrial organizational expert or trained in anything psychoanalytic. You don't have to do that in order to identify if somebody can do your job and if they're going to want to do your job. But these tests are kind of a shortcut to give those kinds of interviewers what they think they need.
Totally. And we started to touch on like where the assessments can go wrong. Like, so I know I had a couple ideas here. I'm sure you did too. It's like, the first thing I thought about was just that they can be like a security blanket. We've talked about references before having the same kind of feeling where hiring is hard and it's a big decision. It's a costly decision. And oftentimes a lot of hiring managers we work with think like, well, what if I get it wrong? Or what if this candidate fails? How is that going to reflect on me? What if like leadership isn't agreeing with my decision? So having this like assessment score feels like you have something in your corner to justify the decision you've made. So if they don't work out, you have this thing of like, well, the tool said X, Y, Z, right? So it becomes like you're sort of outsourcing the risk of you making a decision on interviewing. That's what it feels like.
That's a great way to say it. It just provides this false confidence, this security blanket. You mentioned we talked about security blankets for references. By the way, that needs to be its whole own episode about why we don't believe in reference checks.
We're putting it down. We're going to cover it.
That's going to like rattle some people's worlds, and we just need to like prepare them now that people's feelings are going to be hurt from that future podcast. But
references are the security blanket of interviewing. Boom, title.
And now so are assessments. Like we're just bringing it full circle.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you were talking about confidence. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do think that these assessments are giving people overconfidence in their ability to make a decision on how to hire people. And it's costly. You already said it's like outsourcing that decision.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you said earlier, people want to be like psychologists or all this, and you're not. So like when you're reading these results and interpreting these results, like you're not trained in that. Like, so it's giving you some information, which is great, but it doesn't mean that it replaces sort of, it's giving you confidence, but it's not saying that it should replace what should be there, which is the skill to interpret answers and have a conversation and listen to the candidate. This doesn't replace that where it feels like it replaces it.
If you're just assuming that you know what we need and that we all define assertiveness in the same way. It's like, unless you were, and this is like lots of hypothetical here, but unless you're a part of establishing that assessment in the first place based on your own top performers, I might be able to get behind that. I might. be able to.
Right.
But the way it's set up right now, obviously it would make us tough
Well,
for us to endorse that.
totally. And as a company, I think about like, do you really want to be so reliant on this tool? If you're using it for your internal hiring or your hiring decisions, whatever, internal, external, whatever, you're using it for that. You are now reliant on this tool versus like training people in your company to have the ability to make decisions. That's
Right.
like internal value that you're
Yeah.
missing out on that now you're giving power to a tool. What would you say, like, are they even accurate? Because we're relying on them. 100 million people are taking them. And are they even accurate?
Oh gosh. Okay. Here are my personal experience thoughts is what I'll say about this.
Mm.
When you think about assessments that don't happen in the hiring process, like assessments that happen post-hire,
Yeah.
like for instance, many of our listeners might know about the DISC assessments.
Yes.
Sometimes you take those and you're like, oh my gosh, that is me. Like that is me to a T. How did they do that? Right. And so I do think that some assessments can be really accurate. And I'll still always say that assessments shouldn't determine whether someone gets the job or not. Those assessments post hiring and post interviewing, when you're in the company already, helps teams to work better with each other, but you're not determining someone's entire
Right.
career fate on it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Well, and they call it like predictive hiring, right? So predictive assessments. And when I think about predictive, that means it's going to predict the performance of this person. Job performance. Like that's how I think of it. And what you're saying is like oftentimes a person agrees with the assessment of who they are, but that's not that one-to-one of like, okay, this personality test will predict the outcome. And
Right.
I saw that there was a study, it was in an article published on leaders.com that said when a personality assessment is the only thing used in a hiring decision, it fails to predict job performance 95% of the time. 95% of the time. So if a test becomes the vote, like statistically, you're just being completely reckless. Like you're just saying you don't care because predictive hiring should be about predicting performance, right?
That stat you just gave us, it's not an accurate indication of whether or not somebody can do their job or not. Like
Right.
it's that simple. So either way, you're going to have a trained hiring manager in the mix to review the data, to examine it, to decide, does it really align with top performers here? If you're going to have trained hiring managers anyway, why not just put them at the front end of the interview process instead of the assessment? I mean, it's going to save you a lot of money. It's already an internal employee and you're investing in your people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the best prediction of future behavior is past behavior. That's like the old saying that we all know so well. And we use it a lot in our interviewer training of like the best prediction for job performance is what your past performance is, because performance leaves evidence in your behavior, in your decisions, in the outcomes that you've experienced in the past. There is evidence there. So we're not co-signing assessments. Like we're saying that's not it. So what should people do, like from your perspective, to predict performance?
Well, we want to talk about how we can ask candidates questions to really determine how they act in past difficult situations that will relate to the kinds of difficult situations that you'll have in your job. So for instance, if somebody says like, we need somebody who's resilient, well, first of which we need them to define what resilience means for their specific company. So the answers could differ here based on the company, but the question can sound like, can you walk me through a time you received critical feedback that you disagreed with? Now, again, the right answers are going to be different for every company. You need to take the
based
time
on that definition.
Right. If you need to screen for somebody who can be really great at teamwork, describe a time that you were involved with a conflict within your team, or describe a time that you had to work with a difficult coworker. And you can kind of sense a pattern here. We're putting candidates in a past tense work-related situation that they're going to face in your company and seeing how or if they handled it at all. But we could do that for a lot of things.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite games is when people would come to us. They're like, hey, we want someone for this. One of my favorite games was like coming up with a creative question to do that. And then they were always like, their minds were blown. They're like, did you just come up with that on the spot? I'm like, yeah, I got you.
Right.
It's one of my favorite games. Yeah. Like, so if I were to say like, I want someone who's proactive and I've defined it. So you know that. How would I ask that?
Yeah. Tell me about a time something important was falling behind, or tell me about a time you had a lot of things on your plate at once, something like that.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
project and it was like
Right.
behind schedule.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. See, it's so
Yeah.
fun. It's just
It
like
is.
we can really help you. You don't need the personality assessment.
I
Just come to
know.
us. We got you.
Right. And I get that it is a little bit of hard work. I mean, we can come up with great questions quickly, that follow that rule, that aren't hypothetical,
Right.
that are actually qualifying questions, that aren't leading questions. The effort in there is defining your own right answers. And if you're going to ask an assessment to do that for you, that's where the outsourcing comes in. But if you take the time to define your own right answers, that's going to be a skill that you can continue to use throughout your entire career for yourself and for people that you're looking to hire.
I also want to say, like, I think the intentions are like good when companies adopt assessments. Like, I
Mm.
feel like we've been ragging on them a little bit. And I want to say, I can applaud the fact that when you adopt an assessment, you've vetted that out, you've thought about it. You're probably thinking, hey, this will help standardize. This provides what we've talked about a lot with injecting AI into your hiring process is it gives you explainable decisions. It gives you some defensibility while we don't agree with those, like you relying on the assessment for the decision. It does give you some of that. And you might think it's going to help you reduce bias, right? Because you're saying
Mhm.
no longer is one individual interpreting this. We have this benchmark and this rubric and it's fair. So you have well intentions, right? I want
Mhm.
something scalable. I want something that everyone can use. And that's really, really good. I want companies to understand that we see why this would be attractive. And I
Yeah,
still think assessments can be very useful. The DISC assessment is one of my favorite ones. I've done it
it
in
is.
multiple roles that I've had. I do find it incredibly helpful when you're working on a team and just to understand yourself. And using it in this hiring sense is still not something that we're comfortable with.
I couldn't agree more. And we always tell interviewers to be intentional about their hiring. And this is their way with their knowledge that they have right now of how to be intentional. And we just need to push it a step further. And, the money that you put into these assessments, instead, take that money and invest it into your employees, invest it
Yeah.
into interviewer training, invest it into creating like your own competency banks in the sense of your own right answers. How do top performers act? Like that's a time investment that you can put back into your company. And then making sure that you're also investing time into talking about the people you hired, why you hired them, talking
Mm.
about the people you didn't hire, why you didn't hire them. And then in 6 months, how is that person doing that you hired? If they're doing
Yeah.
great, write down all their actions that they're doing great and the challenges of their job. So
Yeah.
you can invest time and money into different things that will continue to give you good stuff
Yeah.
moving forward.
Well,
Yeah.
what I hear you saying is like standardization through a tool like an assessment is just not the same as standardizing through structured interviewing because
Um,
that builds capacity. The other creates a dependency on the tool, right?
yeah.
So when you think about long term, which one is a better investment?
Right. Right.
I think
Yep.
we know the answer. I don't
Yeah.
think, I think that was a rhetorical question.
Right.
Okay, so you said that you have places where you think assessments do make sense. And I mentioned I love the
Yeah.
DISC assessment. Where would you
Yes.
say that you would be excited about an assessment?
All of the assessments that I strongly support are after hiring, when a person is already an employee for your company, to help people to know how to communicate with one another, understanding your leadership style, or maybe how you like to be led. I mean, all of those things help with communication. I mean, DISC is back to that team dynamic component. I mean, is really valuable. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, just Google DISC.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really valuable tool, but they are there for development, not evaluation for a job, not
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
Right. Because you're using the tool to help somebody grow and thrive and, potentially reach goals that they have
Mhm.
within their career, not blocking someone from an opportunity because of what a personality assessment says. So, in summary, we're saying like companies aren't using assessments because they're careless. They're really using it because hiring is high stakes. And we talk about that all the time. And also, this tool is not a substitute for judgment. So, if the assessment is replacing structured interviewing, you are weakening your hiring process.
And if it becomes a deciding vote, you've outsourced accountability. So predicting performance requires evidence, and evidence shows up in behavior, not in personality labels. Assessments are inputs, they are not decisions.
Yeah. Boom. Mic drop.
Right.
Tattoo that on my forehead.
Thank you all for being here. We will see you next week.